Welcome back to Management 2020. In this video, we'll give advice about how to participate in a class case discussion. So after you have read the case study, it's now time to begin discussing it with your classmates. And here are the kind of main suggestions for having a good group discussion. First, start with the big questions, then go deeper. Make sure as you're discussing, you make requests for clarification and you clarify yourself. You listen to others as a group, that you manage your participation, and that all of you are making sure that you're using argumentation and using evidence to support your recommendations. And lastly, I'll offer some advice on being respectful. So start with the big questions. And the big question could be something like, what should the protagonist do? Or what is the biggest concern or decision that the protagonist faces? This is what the case is mostly about. So finding out what this big question is will help guide you and your teammates. But after you identify that big question, then you need to go deeper with additional questions. So you could use probing questions. Probing questions encourage you to provide reasoning for your opinions and your recommendations. So an example of a probing question might be, tell us more about why you think that, okay? Or what evidence is there to suggest that decision? Hypothetical questions help us consider alternatives. And so we're not just thinking about the case as having one solution, but there could be different ways to approach this problem. And so an example of a hypothetical question might be, what might happen if the protagonist did this? Or what might happen if these factors change? Then we can think about the situation more dynamically instead of just on one track. And then connecting questions help us to analyze and recognize relationships between elements within the case. So, for example, a connecting question might be, well, you mentioned earlier that this would be a possible outcome. How does that connect with maybe making this choice? How could those two things be related? And that can help us see not only different possibilities, but also see how one factor in the case could impact other factors in ways that maybe we hadn't initially considered. As we have these discussions, it's important to ask others to clarify if we don't understand something that they're saying, and encourage elaboration. It could be as simple as, I'd like to know more about that. Please tell me more. And that gets someone to maybe elaborate more on their idea, to explain it using other words, which may help you grasp it more easily. And it will usually help them to provide more explanation. At the same time, we also need to make sure that we're providing clear answers and support. So sometimes we need to clarify ourselves. We might need to say, what I mean to say is, if we did this, this might be an outcome, and here's my support, or here's the reasons why I think that might happen. And so providing that clarification can help us have a more successful discussion. As we are participating, we also need to make sure that we're listening a lot and that we're focusing on the person who's talking at that time. In our digitally connected world, it is not uncommon for me to look out on class, even when not even an entire class discussion, but even small group discussions, and see small groups of students working together, and one student has pulled out their phone. And it's not something that they're doing related to the discussion. They're looking at a news report. They're shopping on their phone. They're looking at memes. Really focus yourself. Put away distracting technology so you can be present and participate in that conversation. And one thing that can help some people stay focused is to take notes on what their classmates are saying. Listen to what they're saying. Take notes to summarize what they're saying. You may even decide as a group you want to take notes collaboratively. Maybe you have a group Google document that you shared so that as you're having your group discussions, you can all add notes to that same document. And it's also okay to allow for some silence. Maybe someone asks a question and no one can think of an answer right away. And that's okay. Just let it be silent. Let people think, and then when they're ready, they can respond. As we have this discussion, it's important to make sure that everyone is participating. And naturally, there are people who are maybe more outgoing or people who naturally are more interested in taking on a leadership role. But we need to monitor participation and we need to solicit participation from everyone. And that means if you're a person who likes to talk a lot, you might need to check yourself to make sure you're not dominating that conversation. Just because you're the leader doesn't mean you're speaking the most. If you take on a leadership role in a team, what it really might mean is you're making sure that there is equal input from everyone. And sometimes groups find that the best way to do this is to assign roles. And sometimes it's a rotating role. They just have a list of maybe 3 or 4 roles, maybe a note taker, a leader or a monitor, and then they might have someone who is keeping track of time or someone who takes on some other role to make sure that everyone is participating equally. Everyone's being invited to participate in the conversation. And you can self-evaluate yourself. Think about, am I taking a balanced role in this team? Have I taken on a variety of roles through our different team meetings so that I'm developing a well-rounded set of skills? And even as a team, you can stop at the end of a team meeting and ask yourselves, what went well with our team meeting today? And what could we do better next time to make sure that we have a more balanced and productive discussion? We mentioned this before, but as you start discussing as a team, you want to make sure that you're basing your statements on the facts and relevant information from the case or other sources, and that you're encouraging others to do the same. We want to make sure that we're building good arguments with claims, reasons, and evidence, so that when we go to write our case analysis report, we're developing those skills ahead of time, and they'll naturally become part of the paragraphs and sentences we write in our report. So it's not good enough to say, I think the protagonist should make this decision because it just seems right. That's not evidence-based. And it may be a really good choice or a good recommendation, but you got to support it. Also, we want to make sure we're being respectful in our team discussions. Sometimes case reports can deal with sensitive topics. They can deal with different groups of people. And sometimes there may be a tendency to say, well, all people from that kind of group act in that way, or, they tend to want or do these things. And just we need to be careful about that, that we're avoiding stereotypes, and that as we talk as a group, we're assuming the best of each other. Now, that said, sometimes we may say things that we don't recognize may appear offensive or hurtful or maybe may come across as ignorant. So making sure we have an open discussion, and if something is said that just is really inappropriate or you find that maybe you feel uncomfortable with it, it's okay to say, hey, I don't think that's kind of the kind of discussion we want to have here, and then redirect the discussion back to the facts of the case. And that can help your conversation stay respectful and productive. So in this video, we talked about some strategies and tips for having a productive group discussion about the case. And in the next video, we'll talk more about how to then take the information and the notes you created from your group discussions to write your own case analysis report.